What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, I want to do a comparison between Apple and Samsung's two cheap smartphones, the new iPhone 16e and the S24 FE. Now, I'm going to be completely honest here. I really don't think anyone in their right mind is truly cross-shopping these two phones. The new iPhone 16e probably has the smallest potential customer base, while the S24 FE actually has some widespread appeal. It's just outshined by Samsung's other, better cheap smartphones within their A-series lineup. Nevertheless, I still think it's interesting to see what each phone offers, being the cheap alternatives to their respective flagships. Though, with that consideration, I'd actually say that only the S24 FE is a flagship alternative. The iPhone 16e is more of a standalone budget device at the very bottom of the iPhone lineup and is so different compared to the actual iPhone 16, so many compromises and limitations that it probably should have just been called the iPhone E, or the SE, again, like it used to be. If you want to just know which is the better device, well, obviously it's the S24 FE by a country mile. I mean, it has a better screen, a better camera setup, bigger battery, faster charging. It even comes in more colors, and no one is going to know that this is the cheap Samsung, because it literally looks exactly like the current S25 flagship. The iPhone 16e, on the other hand, well, aside from people thinking you actually have an iPhone XR, its odd omissions, like its lack of MagSafe and its lonely single camera lens, in addition to its widely criticized 60Hz display, just make it less appealing than even an iPhone from 2 or 3 years ago. Obviously, there's a bit more to the story here with some additional things to think about, and I'm of course going to talk about as much as I can, but let me know if you're actually thinking about either one of these phones right now. And if so, why? Because you're the sole person I guess I made this video for. Before we get into all that, how is your spring cleaning coming along? Might I suggest just leaving it up to the dreamy X40 Ultra robot vacuum and mop instead? With its 12,000 pascals of suction power, it can tackle big crumbs and fine dust with ease. Its side reach extendable side brush gets into tight spaces like corners and baseboard edges, so it won't miss a spot. It also has an auto-extending mop arm to clean under furniture and cabinets and along those same corners and edges. It's smart enough to detect different floor types in your home, clean the different floor types properly, and avoid cross-contamination, lifting those dirty mop pads up high and out of the way. It intelligently maps your home, making note of any furniture or other obstacles and expertly avoiding them thanks to an advanced system of LiDAR sensors, a camera, and AI assistance. And best of all, the X40 Ultra automates its own cleaning, dumping out its dustbin and washing and sanitizing those mop pads with hot water and hot air drying, all within its charging base. Check out my full review of the dreamy X40 Ultra if you want to see it in action, and be sure to click the links in the video description below and use the discount code on screen to save an extra 5% now through March 31st. And thanks to Dreamy for sponsoring this video. So holding these two phones side by side, it really is like comparing apples and oranges. I mean, these two really couldn't be any more different. Size-wise, the S24 FE looks big. It's 6.7 inches, which is sort of standard for Samsung nowadays, while the iPhone 16e is regular iPhone size. The less obvious difference is the screen-to-body ratio. The FE is all screen with minimal bezels and a hole-punch selfie camera, while the iPhone has thicker black borders and the old-school Face ID notch that really gives it a much more dated look. I suppose the iPhone is more comfortable to hold and to handle, but the FE's big screen is actually bigger than the regular flagship S25. It's closer to the S25 Plus, actually, so that feels like an added bonus in a way. Around back, not only do you get way more colors to choose from with the FE, but it also literally looks exactly like Samsung's flagship phone. The iPhone 16e, on the other hand, looks nothing like the top-tier iPhone, and instead more closely resembles something much older. They both do have an all-glass and aluminum build, which is good. Nothing cheap about the materials whatsoever, but if you're a little vain about what device people see you with, I don't think anyone will know you have an FE. The iPhone 16e, though, it looks a little sus. Taking a quick look around at the other physical bits, the iPhone 16e does have the Action button, which is one of Apple's newer iPhone features. A separate, customizable physical button that arguably is more useful than camera control, which didn't make it to this phone. Most everything else, the power and volume buttons on the other side, the USB-C charging ports, and speaker and microphone setups are more or less the same. Like you saw, the selfie camera setups are obviously very different. There's secondary speakers within each of the phone's earpieces too. And one other important difference, the 16e obviously is all Face ID when it comes to unlocking, while the FE does have an in-display fingerprint sensor. The 16e, of course, replaced the last and final home button Touch ID iPhone. So if you want a fingerprint sensor, I suppose you'll have to get an Android. Up at the top, the S24 FE still has a physical SIM card tray. The iPhones here in the US do not have a physical SIM anymore, which is still so annoying and so unnecessary. And something else that's really important, while both phones offer 128GB models as their base configuration, their pricing and higher storage options differ greatly. The iPhone 16e is actually cheaper, if you can believe that, $599 to the FE's $649. If you want more storage, the iPhone can be spec'd up to 256GB for $100 more, or 512GB for a whopping $900. The FE does have a 256GB option for just $50 more, so I suppose that's a closer price comparison, but you can't get any more storage than that. And nowadays, I feel like you need more storage. And no, I don't want to use any cloud storage, thanks very much. Now, I'm not going to beat around the bush. When it comes to the viewing experience, there is a clear winner here. The S24 FE has the much better screen. But the thing is, the iPhone 16e screen isn't any worse because it's a 16e. It's actually the exact same screen as the regular iPhone 16. It's just that Apple doesn't give their regular iPhones good screens. That's still reserved for the Pro models. The S24 FE's big 6.7-inch display is a full HD 2340 by 1080 resolution with 385 pixels per inch, and it's a dynamic AMOLED 2X panel. The iPhone 16e's smaller 6.1-inch display is actually a better than 1080 2532 by 1170 resolution, cramming in a solid 457 pixels per inch. So arguably a bit sharper by that specific measurement, and a similar Super Retina XDR OLED panel of Apple's own creation. However, the iPhone 16e falls short in two important areas. One is brightness. At 800 nits of user-controlled brightness and 1200 nits of peak auto brightness, this phone is far dimmer than the S24 FE's 1900 nits of peak brightness. And probably more importantly, the iPhone 16e offers just a 60Hz refresh rate, while the S24 FE has that adaptive 120Hz high refresh rate. If we're being totally honest, the average iPhone user doesn't know and doesn't even care about refresh rate, but it's still an important distinction to recognize. And this isn't a jab at the 16e specifically, it's the same screen as the regular iPhone 16, which is an even bigger problem, honestly. Arguably, the S24 FE's display is as close to the flagship S25 as can be, and while these aren't direct one-to-one comparisons, there's an S25 Plus with different screen specs, of course, and the Ultra, which is different too, and the iPhone 16 Pro is also different. I think overall the big picture here is just the undeniable fact that the S24 FE not only offers the better screen between these two, it's also the better overall value for the price in this scenario. When it comes to the internal specs and performance, I think this is where the needle falls back in favor of the iPhone a little bit. The 16e is powered by Apple's A18 Bionic processor. It's not quite the exact same chip as what's in the regular iPhone 16, but it's close. The Samsung is actually powered by Samsung's own Exynos 2400E, ironically enough, which is not the same processor as the flagship S24 that it shares its namesake with, and is even less powerful than 2025's components in the S25 lineup. Years ago, Samsung did offer the same processor in their FE as in their flagship, but they stopped doing that. Probably to keep costs low and perhaps to further prop up their flagship phones performance-wise. Apple, on the other hand, is really cementing this iPhone as just as good as their actual iPhone 16, and also future-proofing it in a way, ensuring it'll be just as capable with all the latest iOS updates for years to come. Apple doesn't explicitly guarantee software support like Samsung does. The FE gets 7 generations of Android OS updates and security patches, but if history tells us anything, the 16E will be good for at least 7 years as well. Of course, it's a bit challenging to do speed tests or other performance comparisons because Android and iOS are just so different, but I'll toss in one more element to the equation. The iPhone 16e is also an Apple Intelligence device. And botched release aside, it will get all the AI features that the flagship phones get someday, whenever Apple fixes their AI and Siri debacle. The FE also has Galaxy AI, but Samsung seems more keen on segmenting different Galaxy AI features across different phones. These AI features aren't the same as what the current S25 lineup has, for example, at least right now. There's no other software limitations with either of these phones, nothing to hint at their budgetiness in any way, but I think Apple will offer a more universal OS experience for this phone in the years to come, while the FE may lack some of the newest AI-focused software updates over the next few years. What's also a little different between these two phones is the battery and charging setups. So technically, the iPhone 16e does have a smaller sized 4005 mAh battery compared to the 4700 mAh battery in the FE, but it's a smaller phone, so duh. The iPhone also has a dimmer, less spec-heavy screen, which is probably the equalizer when it comes to outright longevity, but here are a couple other things to consider. Both phones have similar wired charging speeds, but the FE has faster 15-watt wireless charging. In fact, the iPhone 16e doesn't even support Apple's MagSafe charging standard and accessory lineup, just regular wireless charging, which is probably the most ridiculous thing about this phone overall. I mean, talk about cutting corners for literally no reason. And finally, speaking of cutting corners, let's talk cameras, or camera in the case of the iPhone. And this is going to be a little different than how I usually compare phones, but stick with me and I'm sure you'll understand where I'm coming from. Around back, Samsung gave this FE everything. A 50 megapixel main lens, an 8 megapixel telephoto lens for zoom and portrait pics, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. For the 16e, Apple gave this phone next to nothing, just a single 48 megapixel lens. The selfie cameras differ slightly too, 12 megapixels on the iPhone, 10 megapixels on the Samsung, but it's the rear cameras here that are the main story. Normally, I'd compare pictures and videos and try and decide which looks the best, detail with color, the overall look and the balance, but with the 16e, what I'm comparing most here is capability, or lack thereof. No ultra-wide lens is a huge miss. It's honestly just ridiculous. And while I care less about the zoom, the fact that the FE has a telephoto lens with much more capable zoom I think is a big plus too. Yeah, the 16e takes perfectly fine photos and videos, but it just has less capabilities, less features, less lenses than any 2025 smartphone should even have nowadays. This is probably the thing that I understand the least about the 16e. Apple is so camera focused on their flagship phones that you'd think the 16e wouldn't be subpar, but it kind of is. And Samsung's FE is in fact plenty close to their flagship lineup that most people are probably okay and even a bit excited to get everything here. To me, this isn't much of a comparison at all. And the 16e's single camera setup is probably the biggest negative when you compare it to any other $500 plus smartphone in 2025. Overall, I don't think this was a very good comparison, honestly, but it is still interesting to see what Apple and Samsung offer for their budget devices. I think the FE is a good all-around smartphone. It's just not great within Samsung's own lineup when they have all those A-series phones that this directly compares with. The iPhone 16e, on the other hand, like I said at the start, its limitations make it less appealing than a used iPhone 12 Pro, to be honest, and I think the potential pool of customers for this phone is just so small. But what do you guys think? Would you pick either one of these phones? let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though. Be sure to follow Tech Daily on Twitter and subscribe to the Tech Daily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.